Hi everyone, we're back again for our next podcast, and to be honest, we're just going to jump straight into this one. We're sort of going to be talking around the importance of students to Canterbury. That can mean a load of different things, and we'll sort of explore that question. As always, get involved in the comments. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about. Let us know of anything you perhaps disagree with us on, and really let's just crack on with this podcast. So there are 3 universities in Canterbury, 4 if you count that American one, which I have no idea what that actually is. You've obviously got us, you've got Kent, and you've got the Creative Arts University. So there's probably 40,000 students, maybe at its
about
peak.
40,000, yeah.
I don't know what the population of Canterbury is generally. Does anyone? Should have done that research already.
I Google it.
Yeah.
Keep talking. I'll Google.
Have a look. But yeah, I think it's definitely average about 40,000 students during the university term. Yeah, in Canterbury.
And really my point around this is many students obviously aren't in Canterbury when the non-student periods are, whereas we are. So what do you see as the main difference between when students are here and when students are not here?
Traffic. Yeah. It's
do you think the students are actually ones contributing to that though?
Yeah, I'm sure it does make a difference.
Like, are students actually contributing to traffic?
I don't know. I think
it's probably staff more than anything.
I think a lot of students do drive, so I think it does make a difference. The students aren't here, although it is always generally it is busy all the time. To be fair, the roads and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's really random in Canterbury how like 1 o'clock in the afternoon it'll be like packed. It'll be Ramo, and then 5 o'clock when it's rush hour, it's not. It's just really weird in Canterbury. So, but I don't think it makes much difference. But I think it does make a little difference maybe.
Well, I think it makes a bit of a difference, particularly so we'll probably live, Becky, you won't obviously, but we'll live in predominantly student areas. And it's like a ghost town in the summers. There's no one around, it's very quiet. You have a few, obviously, students around that have stayed over the summer to work and things like that, but it is quite noticeably different. Campus is obviously and understandably dead. Almost no point going there. So I think there is a significant, and then even if you walk through town, I think on maybe not on the weekends, but on certain days and maybe nights, no one around compared to when students were around, there probably would be people. So I do think you can see a difference.
I think we're talking about more of the time before the pre-COVID, I presume. Obviously now it's obviously quite quiet, but we're not can't always focus on Corona. We've got to look past it forwards and backwards around before this Corona.
But
that's what I meant. But if we're talking about obviously before the time,
But
there's probably.
Go on.
I was going to say there's probably less resident complaints about bins when students go.
Well, that kind of leads me on to my next sort of question, actually, Chloe, is around the changes. Have we noticed any changes? This is probably directed at Jamie, you, who interact with community through your role a bit more. I'm sure we'll all have an aspect of that we can chip in. Changes in people's or residents' tone when talking about students. So obviously when students are here, it's seen as quite negative. Students are seen as a drain. Students are seen as a nuisance. Students are sort of anything that sort of negatively happens in Canterbury, it's almost immediately a student rather than just a person that did it. Have we seen a difference in that since students now who should be here are now not here because most of them have gone home, or a lot of them have gone home?
Well, there's an obvious one, isn't there, in that financially the city as it stands would not be able to sustain itself if students weren't there. Half the shops that exist within the city walls, the astronomical rent that they charge, they wouldn't be able to charge that if there weren't the students funding it.
Definitely, we use this not excuse, but we use this argument in council meetings and stuff as well. Like how if they moan about students, residents, it's got a lot better, by the way. But obviously, if it weren't for the students, a lot of local business, especially smaller ones, wouldn't really exist. As you said, they'll really struggle. And obviously, some of the shops like McDonald's wouldn't make as much money if students weren't here. Stuff like that as well. Places like that.
Isn't it something like they contribute like 2.3 million or something over the course of a year? From 3 universities.
I would guess it's probably a lot more than that.
Is it more than that? I know there is a figure that's specifically for students as well. They've changed that from like tourism in itself, so they've kind of disaggregated the data, whereas students really do contribute massively to it. And without students, there'd be so many things that just wouldn't wouldn't exist anymore. The gyms, you wouldn't have like 4 gyms in a 5-mile radius, you know. You just wouldn't have it. I
think like local charities benefit off students as well, don't they? Like, you think the amount of charity work UKC do plus us within societies and sports teams, they definitely benefit. I think it's a shame as well that maybe more isn't spoken about, how much students do for the community in terms of like charity as well.
Because as a uni, we do quite a lot for local charities, don't we? Especially, I know the Umbrella Centre, places like that. We do quite a lot for work for. So it's about highlighting that, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Not even as a union, but as a university. The amount of our students that undertake volunteering, either as part of their course or like curricular, is astronomical. Like, there's loads. Loads of our students do that, but it's just not talked about. They always see students as a negative, a drain. You know, they create rubbish, they're unruly or whatever, and it's just not. Yeah, it's just not how they really are. Some of them are, but the majority aren't.
Yeah, we're talking generalizations here, aren't we? Generalizing positively and negatively. There obviously are exceptions. But do you think that's potentially changed then? So obviously at the moment we should be in, I can't even remember if it's now meant to be the Easter break or not. If we're still in that period.
Past that now.
All the days and weeks are blurring into one, to be honest. I can't pick out what part of the calendar we're on at the moment. But do you think that's potentially, the tone is potentially shifting, because students obviously should be in Canterbury, or majority of them should be in Canterbury now in this period, obviously aren't. That coinciding with the current situation of Corona, where shops and things aren't even open at the moment. Do you think there is an appreciation of local businesses, but people in general being like, oh, we do actually need students?
I don't think so. I think if anything, it's gone the other way. Like, I don't know how we'd measure it, but obviously if you look at like Canterbury Residents Group, where even still the posts on there are like, either they don't talk about students anymore and they found someone else to scapegoat, or they'll talk about them being like, oh, they're just complaining about their rent. Like, you know, everyone else in the world has to pay rent. Why should they be exempt? Lazy students, blah, blah, blah. It's obviously not the case at all. It's the fact that people have lost their bloody jobs. That's the issue. I think the issues are still there. I don't think they ever see us as a positive influence.
They always jump to conclusions. Well, I don't see like the reasons behind stuff, and like she's just said. So yeah, it's a bit frustrating sometimes. But yeah, I think that's going to take a long time to change that. I think, but I think it has got a lot better though. From like speaking to like there's obviously in the council meetings there's like resident association representatives who like live in different areas, student located like Windsheet, places like that. And they're definitely saying they're more positive about how bins are put out and how they're very more friendly. Obviously, I think one lady said her whole street student house, apart from literally her. So every other house in the road is student apart from her. But yeah, she seems to be treating her quite nicely. They know where she is. Well, knows to respect her house and the area. So yeah, I think it has got a lot better from previous years.
How do we, as a group, then, as a group with influence in different areas, potentially change that culture? And it's probably not for us as the current crop, but as the next group, Becky, but not just within Christchurch Students' Union and Christchurch University, it's obviously wider. Kent Union will have inputs on it, Kent University will have inputs on it, UCA, etc. How do we go about tackling that current culture of blaming students for things that just general people can do? And also even my language just then, how we don't include students as general people and general public, we brand them as students rather than just as people.
Well, it came out, I saw that really heavily during the general election, because even within different like parties and stuff like that, you heard people going, oh, they're galvanising the students, as in the student population of that city, whereas, and there was arguments within within different factions and stuff about whether or not a student should be allowed to run on committees and things for like local parties, because you know, ultimately we are here. I say I'm an exception to the rule. I live here anyway, but general are here 8-9 months of the year. Postgraduates a lot longer, like whole years at a time. If you are then a resident, where does that line stop? Residents don't see you as they see you as an outsider. entire time you're a student. Even if like someone like Adam, for example, who's literally lived here since he started uni, he's still seen as an outsider, or he would still be seen as like extension of the student population. So where does that kind of end?
Well, yeah, Chloe, yeah, because Chloe's been in Canterbury, what, 6 years, Chloe?
Yeah.
So at what point, so if Chloe in her first year decided I want to be involved in any side of politics, etc., why would she not be allowed? She's going to be living here for the next 5 years.
Exactly, yeah.
So how is it fair that, because she has another home somewhere else, that she should actually go back to that home and do it there when she doesn't live there?
But that's always the argument. And students are allowed to run. There's no rules to stop them from running. There's like tension within party politics, or like local party politics. It's like that. And I think we see that as well in just general kind of, like you say, how you speak about students. They talk about them as students. That's almost as bad as using another demographic and labeling them as those types of people. Like, it's just a categorization that doesn't need to happen, because not all students are the same. Like, I could live in Canterbury, I'd be a very different student to an 18-year-old.
The worst, I think the worst sort of term is when people go, oh, it was probably student types. You know, where you go, oh, it was the student types. And you just think, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah. What's a defining feature of a student type? The fact that you're in education. Well, that's literally most people at some point in their life. So,
do you think they use it as a definite? I say they again, but do you think people use it as a describing of just a young group? Because we obviously know that students are all ages, especially at Christchurch. But do you think majority of people within Canterbury and wider population just see young people and they go, right, they must be students, so therefore students have caused that issue?
I think so.
Yeah. I do think there's also a political slant to it as well, where they kind of see people like me, okay, nose ring, like bit boho-y, maybe a little bit activisty. That for them isn't a typical student, because you're a left-wing activist student at a university. That's what people think of. I think you've got then the other side of it, where they go younger students, which is like the chavvy kind of students. They go, oh, the student-y types from college. There's different levels of student, right? And I think other people do. They stereotype like that as well. If you see a couple of lads sat in Dane John drinking a few cans of lager and they look quite young, they're going, college students. But if you see, I don't know, a group of people laying on the floor, talk about Marxist theologies or whatever, you go, oh yeah, it's the student-y types from Christchurch. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's different levels.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because student doesn't mean necessarily, do they associate university with students? Because obviously college is obviously students as well. Anyway, so yeah.
So then, coming back to the original question, how do we potentially start to change that culture? Or do we even need to, is another question.
I don't think they're ever going to change anyway. I think obviously I have a very opinion. It's not this is fact or whatever, but it was something that I kind of suggested to you guys, and we as a SAB team pushed forward at the start of Corona, which was, if we can get out there now in the community and show that we're doing good, so almost go above and beyond to support people, to support the local community as a union, as a group of students, we can go some way to like building a reputation that isn't just moaning about us. They'll think about us in the future and go, oh, they were really helpful during Corona. They, offered up their accommodations, or they did this or whatever. That's kind of how I would always approach it, is go above and beyond and kill them with kindness. Because no one can moan about you if you've got like objective things that you've done that are bloody good and they're publicised.
I agree with you. I'm just going to play devil's advocate quickly, in that anything that's seen negative. So let's take Jamie's gender pronoun badges, for example, at the start of last year, where that was obviously a massively positive thing, but was spun completely negatively, and then that's the one thing that sticks, rather than the 10,000 other potentially good things, even though the pronoun badges was good. But 10,000 other good things, that one thing that they thought was negative is the thing that sticks in their minds.
It's the age-old thing, isn't it? How do you tackle small-mindedness?
It's all opinionated, so there's no evidence to back up or anything. There's all just like, this is my opinion, I don't agree with it.
There is a lot, if I can just go into the psychology of it, there is a lot of fear around us. There's a lot of fear around students, because we are educated
Yeah.
And we're educated to, you know, and I'm not saying these people aren't educated, but it's in a very different time for a start, very different kind of institution, if they've even gone to university in the first instance, because generationally the likelihood is that they haven't. The likelihood is that that generation weren't those where they went to university, they went into trades or whatever. So I think there's a lot of fear around having young, politically active, as they would see it, kind of educated people in their city. It's quite a scary thing because they are of another generation. They don't see that, if that makes sense. So it is narrow-mindedness, but it's bred from fear. We are the other and the unknown to them.
Yeah.
When another positive, sorry, Karen.
No, go on.
No, okay, it might have been slightly off a little bit, not on to do with that. But another positive thing that I've seen is when I went to neighbourhood walk days with the council and the police and people like that, we go around obviously all different houses. And obviously, it's hard to tell if they're a student house or not a lot of the time, especially behind university. So we knock on the doors, and obviously we see like normal residents, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, we didn't realise, we didn't know you were a student." Obviously, us assuming that obviously they're not a student, obviously. But they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Obviously, we're going around giving out wall plans, explaining about the rubbish situation, make sure students keep the rubbish under control, make sure the house is nice and tidy, that sort of thing. And they're like, "Oh, it's really good, really positive." So I think has a good feedback from the students, from the local resident houses that we have knocked on the door of, which is obviously really positive. But they like to see that we're sort of taking action almost if they're not following those guidelines, which is good. So if students are not doing rubbish, then they issue them with a fine at the time. The issue with students making sure they do keep it under control. So I think there is action. It shows the residents that there's actions being taken to ensure students are respecting the community.
So here's a question then. So Jamie, this is not a criticism of you because we all do it, but just then you used the term normal residents. So when referring to people that stay in Canterbury who aren't students, for example, and my question then is, if a student's in Canterbury 7-8 months of the year, let's say, and they're not considered a normal resident, how? So let's say someone who in the uber rich category who spends 6 months in England and 6 months wherever else when they're chasing the sun, are they considered a normal resident still in their place that they live?
True. Yeah.
So that's another point to the argument is
exactly.
How can students, even though students only stay in their accommodation for 8 months, not be normal residents or not just be residents of Canterbury? They have to be this specific genre of student residents that is distinct and separate. But my follow-up point, what Becky said earlier, around how we're seen as different. So students are seen as different, and therefore some residents don't necessarily want to engage and be traditionally neighbours or something with students. Do you think the student population is trying to be that with residents, or do you think both sides are trying to stay distinct and separate and stay within their own bubbles? Oh, there we go.
You guys, I haven't been in halls in Canterbury or like in a residence in Canterbury, so I don't know.
Yeah, I would say it's a mixture, but I would say that students generally group together, and we've seen that in loads of other behaviour. And Becky, you can go into a psychology point of view if you want, but people group together with the other people that they can see themselves being the same as, and we all, as a defining feature, we're all students underlining, so therefore we group together. Residents will probably not be doing it in the same way because they just need somewhere, they want somewhere to live and they want somewhere to work and they want somewhere to wherever. Students are naturally creating sort of student areas as well with the housing market, and they've all got a part to play. The students are naturally creating sort of student bubble hubs almost. I don't know whether they're doing it on purpose or not, but
I think there's also, oh God, there's a wasp in my thing. I think there's all sorts of reasons behind it. So a lecturer of mine, she was a Christchurch student, now she's a lecturer, and she was looking to move house, right? And she said to me, "Oh, we're looking around," and the estate agent said, "Oh, I won't show you this house, particularly in an area of Surrey, because it's a student spot." Even though she was looking to buy a home, they assumed that she wouldn't want to buy a home there because student area. So I think there's like compounding factors on this. I think ultimately it comes down to they want to be distinct and separate, if that's I'm thinking if I was buying a house, would I, with a 3-year-old and with a full-time job, whatever, want to live next door to, or, you know, squash between 2 student residences? Probably not, due to the lifestyles. Like, I know what a student lifestyle's like, I've lived it, so probably wouldn't want to be in the middle and every Wednesday night kind of hear whatever's going on. So then is that then the estate agents, you know, compounding that? Are the, I don't know, the food outlets are then gravitating towards areas where students more are, so then it, you know, makes that more of a feature within the student bubble? And there's probably lots of things that go into it. Police as well probably play a role, where they're called out to certain areas more than others to do with different things, which then they then refer to them as certain things. And yeah, it's a cultural thing, I reckon. That'd probably be how it works. I don't know if definitely assume that's how it works.
Yeah, it'll be almost systemic, and it'll be a circular motion, and it'll go round on, as we've all heard Ben describe, on a merry-go-round, that eventually it will just one triggers the next, and it all just keep going round.
And it probably changes though. I would imagine it changes with like new student accommodations being built. Like, you know, there's student accommodation being built on Military Road.
Yeah.
Near your guys' place, isn't it? It's just down that at the end of the little alleyway bit. I wonder how that's going to change the dynamic, because that's like slap bang in a place where there isn't really anything there. It's like it's just a road, isn't it? Really, it's not anything. So I'm wondering how that's going to change traffic near the roundabouts, how that's going to change the food outlets and stuff, and more things going to be popping up nearer to it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then just coming back and focusing more on the centre of town in terms of talking about how places are catering to students, for example, and it's sort of somewhat hinges on your point before. My parents live in Winchester, like I've said before on the podcast, but they've obviously come down to Canterbury, and they've said they've never seen more places in Canterbury advertising student deals and restaurants doing 20% off and things doing this. And so it does allude to the fact that Canterbury needs tourism, but Canterbury needs students to sort of bump up their profit margins, basically. Otherwise, they wouldn't be advertising all this 20% off, come eat here, or student deal, students eat 50% off on a Wednesday, or whatever. And it does come back to that need. And we talked about the cyclical thing, but Canterbury is somewhere in that circle. Canterbury needs students to engage with its businesses, otherwise the circle won't complete, and then we break down.
I wonder if people actually make that link though, because what could be happening is that although they, on a very business financial level, definitely need students, I wonder if the residents realise how much they need them.
Yeah.
Well,
obviously those that go on, Jamie.
I'll say, well, that could open up some sort of like communication or some promotion around that, couldn't it? About how much we need students in the city. That could be good.
Yeah,
that could be quite valuable.
Yeah, I can already see it though.
I feel like it would be such a big thing.
I know it'd be
the one thing that just the immediate idea that jumped into my mind was to demonstrate how much money students spend, but also how much money they do fundraising, for example. But then I know the immediate clapback will be like, well, how much damage do students make in town every Wednesday night, and how much do they cause? And
or it will come back round. It will go, well, why are they always complaining that they can't afford their rent if they're spending X amount? You just stereotypes will always be there, that students are scroungers. I get it from my bloody stepdad all the time. Oh, are you still a scrounger? No, actually I work full time as well, thank you very much. But there's always that kind of thing, you know. It's ingrained. I don't think you can change a culture just in Canterbury. I think this is probably, well, it is definitely sector wide, isn't it? If we went to Nottingham, they'd have the same problem. If we went to Lincoln, they'd have the same problem. Southampton, Bournemouth, like they'd all have the same problem.
Yeah.
And some of those will have larger student populations than us.
Yeah.
But probably not as a percentage. I'd like to know the population as a percentage of Canterbury. I reckon it's quite high.
Well, Southampton, it's a similar size, isn't it, in terms of city? Like if you actually think about Southampton city centre, it's a similar sort of size, just a bit more spread. It's a bit more spread out, but it'd be a similar sort of size. If you take out the docks and things like that,
I reckon population of Southampton's higher than Canterbury.
I'm going to go.
Yeah, I did look, and Canterbury's like 55,000.
Okay.
But that's the last one. They've had that since 2011. I don't think they've updated it since.
Yeah,
so I don't know about Southampton.
Let's have a look.
God, nearly
they're quite a lot larger, but then that's everybody.
Yeah.
It's like 255,000.
Yeah, I'd say that Southampton's.
But then that's the whole of Southampton, isn't it? Yeah.
That is, yeah. And so the thing is, like, you know, Phil, Southampton will also include places like, I don't know, Bewley and all the way out to like the New Forest kind of area.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it'll be the surrounding areas as well. But I'm assuming, yeah, I don't know if that's Canterbury City that you've got there, or if that's Canterbury and surrounding areas. Surrounding areas, 55,000 would be quite low for surrounding areas.
Yeah. Interesting. It'd be something I'd like to look at, because there are other cities like Leeds, for example, Manchester, who have like 3 or 4 universities, some of them larger, some of them smaller. Obviously they're going to have large populations, but I guess per like capita, I wonder what the is
exactly.
But also we've got an interesting tourist spot as well. Not many other places will have a tourist spot like we do, maybe only somewhere like York, I would think, that would kind of bring the tourists in. But because we're so close to Dover as well, like what people usually do is come into Dover, go to Canterbury, go to like Ashford Outlet, and then go back off to Dover and like back over to France. So we're in a really interesting position in this area.
Yeah, which obviously brings its challenges, which we don't need to go into now.
That's another conversation.
Yeah, let's not even open it. Let's not open the box. So really, we haven't got much longer left. So really, let's have some sort of summary, because knowing us, we won't stick to this final question. And it's really, will Canterbury survive? And survive can be any way you want to word it, but will Canterbury survive, or could it survive without students?
I think it would.
Survival means.
Yeah,
that's why I used that terminology.
Yeah.
I think it would, but there would have to be some restrictions, wouldn't it? Like, I think some companies would struggle, but I think it wouldn't make a massive difference, because there's probably a good section of the year where students aren't around, such, and they still manage to do all right. So,
okay. So let me.
Yeah,
so
I think. I was going to say, so I think financially, Canterbury would struggle, but it's just one of those things where would they just adapt and evolve over the years?
Oh yeah. I mean, before the universities were here, Canterbury was always a tourist spot. Okay, they had less shops and it was a very different demand, but they did. And let's not forget, pretty much all of Canterbury is run by the church. So I don't think they're going to be anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you would see some industries really harmed, if not die, from it. And I think some, like the tourist industry, would be fine, because really it doesn't need students, although it might need students as workforce. You have to factor in the fact that students will be workforce as well. So they may not have any staff that they can hire, because people may not want to work there. I'm just guessing and putting that forward. I think particularly anything late night industry would have a massive
I was going to say that.
hit. But again, Chloe's right. Would or could they adapt? Possibly. But it depends whether they would be able to adapt in time to mitigate anything.
Yeah, we don't know how long it will take to adapt. But,
I don't know. I think it's like the rest of the world, isn't it? Realistically, Canterbury probably in a better situation than most. If they all just up and left, all the students like didn't go back for 2 years, I think they'd be fine, because the amount of stuff that they have got there, a lot of it does cater to residents as well. And the residents are still there, and when I say resident, I mean full-time, long-term residents. They're still there.
So really, we have no answer. Which is fine. That's the purpose of these, is to have a conversation, because we were never going to have an answer. So, so thanks for watching for 40 minutes, but we don't have an answer for you.
Oh dear.
Anyone got anything to say before we run out of time on our Zoom call?
I find it an interesting concept to think about, the relationship between students and long-term residents. And I just look at it, why is there so much animosity? And then it just comes back, for me, it comes back to, there's a 1970s film called Warriors, which is like very rival between like stuff. And I think that's what it's like. They're scared of us. We're kind of a bit belligerent of them. And that's how it ends up.
and both sides just tolerate each other.
Pretty much, yeah, until it spills over. And you saw that in the general election when it spilled over, when you ended up with a very much an us and them, because the long-term residents were 75% Conservative, and then you found a majority of the students as left-wing. So you had this horrid animosity that then bubbled over at that point. And I think there were some nasty things to come out of that. But thankfully, we're past that point now.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, well.
Let's not open that Pandora's box either. So
that's another podcast. Can we do a political podcast? Because I'd be interested in that one.
Oh God.
Yeah.
We'll get some guests. We'll get some guests on for that one.
Definitely get Rosie Duffield. Rosie, if you're watching, come on our podcast.
Give us a comment if you have watched this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, so at the end of it, we'll tell Adem that that's something we've talked about. We'll get him to tag her in it.
Oh, we're clickbaiting. That's amazing. Let's clickbait.
It's all about the likes.
Yeah. I'll just stick it on my Twitter. Done.
Right, let's round this off then.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got our clickbait. We've had a conversation. We've got our title. Right, next one. On to the.
What are we thinking of doing for the next one? Has anyone got any ideas?
Well, we want the next one to be with all the other SABs for next year. But they need to get back to me. Message me back.
Nathan.
Yeah.
Anyway,
cool.
So, we'll, like always, get involved with us in the comments or message us directly. We will have other guests. I know of one in particular that's already reached out that we will have on at some point. So yeah, let us know. And get involved. And as always, we're always still here. We're always still doing work and always still contactable. So get in touch. But thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, everyone. See you soon.